I didn't know my entire understanding of family would shatter the day my 8-month-old son was lowered into the ground, while my parents were posing for photos at my sister's birthday party. I never imagined I would be standing beside a tiny white coffin, holding my husband's trembling hand, and realizing that the people who raised me had chosen balloons over burial. My name is Emily. I'm 34 years old, a high school math teacher, a wife, and a mother who buried her baby. 3 months ago, my son Matthew died from complications of pneumonia. It happened so fast that even now I sometimes wake up thinking I still need to check his breathing monitor. The night he passed, I thought the worst pain I would ever feel was watching the life leave his small body in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and exhaustion. I was wrong. The worst pain came 2 days later when I called my parents, Robert and Linda, to tell them the funeral would be Saturday morning. There was silence on the phone. Then my mother said, carefully, almost apologetically, "Saturday is Chloe's birthday celebration." Chloe, my younger sister, turning 30. They had rented a venue, ordered catered food, planned speeches, deposits had been paid, and apparently that mattered more. I remember gripping the kitchen counter so hard my knuckles went white. "You're not saying what I think you're saying," I whispered. My father took the phone. "We already committed to hosting her party, Emily. Canceling now would disappoint a lot of people." A lot of people. More than their grandson's funeral. I don't remember hanging up. I just remember sitting on the nursery floor afterward, surrounded by Matthew's blankets, realizing something irreversible had happened. Not just his death, but something in me. At his burial service, my phone buzzed. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. And there they were. Instagram stories. My parents smiling under string lights, helping set up decorations, laughing beside a cake that said 30 and thriving. The timestamp read 10:17 a.m. That was exactly when we were lowering my son into the ground. That was the moment I understood. I hadn't just lost my child. I had lost my family too. And I didn't know how to survive either grief. Before Matthew died, I used to believe my family was flawed but normal. You know, the kind of normal where birthdays get noisy, holidays get awkward, and you learn to laugh off the little disappointments because that's just how parents are. But looking back now, I can see the pattern so clearly it makes me nauseous, like I'd been living inside a house with crooked walls and only noticed after the foundation cracked. I'm Emily, 34, and I teach high school math. I'm the kind of person who likes things that add up, that make sense. I plan lessons by the week, color code grading, keep emergency snacks in my desk drawer, and when life gets messy, I've always believed if I worked harder, I could stabilize it. My husband, Sarah, no. That name doesn't work after swapping genders. My husband is Ryan, 31. A dental hygienist? No, he wouldn't be. So in our version, Ryan is a dental lab technician. He works long hours shaping crowns and bridges, hands steady, eyes tired, the kind of man who speaks softly but shows up loudly. We've been married 4 years. We bought our first house 2 years ago, a modest place, an hour away from my parents. Not far enough to feel free, not close enough to feel supported. My parents, Robert, 64, and Linda, 62, are retired, comfortably so. The kind of retired where mornings are slow and afternoons are full of commitments, book club, brunch, volunteer committees, and the constant hum of being busy in a way that somehow never includes you unless you make it easy. And then there's my sister, Chloe, 30, marketing manager, social, loud laugh, sharper tongue, always the one who could walk into a room and rearrange the energy around her like furniture. Growing up, Chloe was the sun. Everything orbited her. When she made cheerleading in high school, my parents threw her a surprise party. Streamers, friends, cake, the works. I remember standing in the kitchen, watching my mother adjust balloons with a smile so bright it almost hurt to look at. My father filming her entrance like it was a movie premiere. When I got into college with a partial scholarship, my dad patted my shoulder and said, "That's expected." Expected. No party, no dinner, no proud photos on the fridge. Just that word, like I'd done homework, not achieved something that changed my life. The pattern followed us into adulthood like a shadow that never got tired. When Chloe bought her first car, my parents helped with the down payment, called it an investment in her future. When Ryan and I were scraping together every spare dollar for our house, we asked if they could help us the same way. My mother didn't even look guilty when she said, "We already spent the savings on Chloe's car." Like it was weather, like it couldn't be helped. When Chloe got her first promotion, my parents organized a family dinner at an expensive restaurant. Linen napkins, champagne, my mom wearing her special occasion earrings. My dad made a toast about Chloe's ambition. When I got tenure at my school, something I'd worked years for, they sent a text. Congrats, proud of you. No phone call, no toast, just pixels. I kept telling myself it didn't matter because I was older, more independent, the responsible one. That's the lie families like mine teach you early. If you're strong, you don't get to need things. Then I got pregnant, and I thought stupidly that a baby would shift something in them, that becoming grandparents would soften the edges, make them show up differently. Ryan's parents did. They were excited in a quiet, steady way. His mother cried when we told her. His father immediately started researching car seats like it was a sacred mission. They drove over on weekends, helped us paint the nursery, brought meals, asked questions about my doctor appointments like they wanted to hold every detail close. My parents? My dad said, "That's good news." My mother's first response was, "Chloe might want kids someday too." Like my pregnancy was a teaser trailer for Chloe's main event. Still, I tried. I kept them included. I sent ultrasound photos. I called after appointments. I told my mom when the baby kicked for the first time and my eyes filled with tears because I could feel a tiny life insisting on being real inside me. She replied, "Cute." When Matthew was born, the contrast became impossible to ignore. Ryan's parents were at the hospital within an hour. They brought coffee, clean clothes, snacks, and a kind of calm that kept me from falling apart. My parents showed up the next day for about 30 minutes. 30. They stood at the foot of my bed like visitors in a museum. My mother held Matthew for 2 minutes. 2. Then handed him back like she was afraid of doing it wrong. My father glanced at his watch and said they had book club. Book club. I remember lying there, exhausted, my body aching, my baby's tiny face wrinkled and perfect, and thinking, maybe they're just nervous. Maybe they'll grow into it. They didn't. Over the next 8 months, Ryan's parents visited twice a week. Sometimes they didn't even stay long, just enough to drop off groceries, fold laundry, let me shower without listening for crying. My parents visited maybe 6 times total, always when it was convenient. I kept sending photos, Matthew's first smile, his first tooth, the way he would squeeze my finger like he was anchoring himself to the world. My mother responded with a thumbs up emoji. My father rarely responded at all. Meanwhile, Chloe would post a selfie at brunch, and my parents would flood the comments with heart emojis and paragraphs about how beautiful she looked, how proud they were of her, how she lit up every room. And I kept swallowing it, because I thought that was my job. Then, 3 months before Matthew got sick, Chloe announced she was planning a big 30th birthday weekend. Rented venue, friends, caterer, a milestone celebration. My parents jumped into planning like it was a second career. They talked about it nonstop. Themes, menus, playlists, guest lists. Like it was the most important thing happening in our family. Around the same time, Ryan and I started planning Matthew's baptism. We chose a weekend without thinking too hard. Because why would we? No one had ever treated my milestones as conflicts worth rearranging. When I told my parents the baptism date, my mother said immediately, "That's Chloe's party weekend." I suggested gently, "It's in the morning. The party is in the evening. You could do both." My father replied, "We can't risk missing any part. We're helping host." And I remember the feeling in my chest. Not anger yet, just a slow, familiar sinking. A resignation, like my body already knew what my mind kept refusing to accept. I wish I could tell you that's when I stopped trying. But I didn't, because I still believed deep down that family had limits, that there was a line they wouldn't cross. And I hadn't learned yet that some families don't have lines. They have preferences. If Matthew's death was the earthquake, then everything that happened before it was the quiet shifting of tectonic plates I kept pretending I didn't feel. 2 weeks before he got sick, Chloe came over for dinner. She arrived late as usual, perfume first, voice second. "Oh my God, Em, you look exhausted," she laughed, air kissing my cheek. "Motherhood is really doing a number on you." Ryan stiffened beside me, but I shrugged it off. "I have an 8-month-old, I said lightly. Sleep is a myth." Chloe wandered into the living room, where Matthew was in his playpen, chewing on a teething ring. She crouched down and took a few photos for Instagram. I noticed she didn't actually pick him up. "Cute," she said. "He's at that blob stage." Blob stage. Ryan's jaw tightened. I touched his arm. "Let it go." My parents arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a bottle of wine for Chloe. My mother hugged her first. My father asked about party planning before he even acknowledged Matthew. "How's my favorite girl?" my mom asked Chloe, brushing hair from her face. I stood there holding my son. No one asked how I was. During dinner, the entire conversation revolved around the birthday venue. Lighting. Guest list drama. the cake tasting. At one point, I tried to mention that Matthew had just started pulling himself up on furniture. "Oh, that's nice," my father said distractedly. "Chloe, did you finalize the DJ?" The room shifted back to her, like always. Later that night, after everyone left, Ryan stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes too aggressively. "They don't see him," he said quietly. "They do," I insisted automatically. "No, Emily, they see her. They don't see him." I didn't respond, because some truths are too sharp to hold. When Matthew caught what we thought was a simple cold, I didn't panic. Babies get sick, it's part of the deal. He had a little cough, a low fever. I stayed home from school 2 days. Ryan rearranged shifts. We did humidifiers, saline spray, warm baths. By Sunday night, his breathing sounded different, wetter. He struggled to finish a bottle. By Monday morning, his tiny chest was pulling inward with every breath. I remember the sound of it, the small, desperate rhythm. We rushed him to the ER. The fluorescent lights were too bright, the air too cold. The nurse moved quickly but calmly, the kind of calm that tells you this isn't minor. "Pneumonia," the doctor said after the chest x-ray. It progressed rapidly. Rapidly. We were admitted. 3 days blurred into each other. Machines, oxygen tubes, nurses adjusting monitors. I slept in a chair with my head against the wall. Ryan barely left Matthew's side. Ryan's parents rotated shifts, bringing food, clean clothes, fresh coffee. His mother rubbed my back while I cried in the bathroom once. I called my parents the first night. "Matthew's in the hospital," I said. My mother inhaled sharply. "Oh no. Well, keep us posted." They didn't come. Tuesday passed. Wednesday evening, everything changed. The alarm started first. Then nurses. Then doctors. Then words that didn't fit into reality. "We're doing everything we can." At 2:13 a.m. Thursday morning, my son was gone. I remember the silence after the machines stopped. It wasn't loud. It was worse. It was empty. Ryan collapsed against the wall. I held Matthew's hand until it grew cold. I didn't scream. I think something inside me simply shut down. Thursday afternoon, I called my parents. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "He's gone." There was silence. Then my mother's voice, tight and careful. "Oh, Emily, I'm sorry." My father asked about funeral arrangements like we were discussing logistics for a PTA meeting. "We're planning Saturday morning at the church," I said. That pause. That horrible, stretching pause. "Saturday is Chloe's party," my mother said quietly. And suddenly all those small moments, the dinners, the missed milestones, the emojis instead of effort, rearranged themselves into something unmistakable. This wasn't new. This was who they were. I felt it in my chest before I fully understood it in my head. A slow dawning recognition. They were going to choose her. Again. And this time the cost wasn't my pride. It was my son. That night, Ryan sat on the nursery floor with me. The crib was empty. The air still smelled faintly of baby lotion. "They'll come," he said, though it sounded like he was convincing himself. No one misses their grandson's funeral. I didn't answer. Because somewhere deep down, something in me had already stopped hoping. The moment my parents chose my sister's birthday party over my son's funeral wasn't loud. It wasn't a screaming match. It was calm. That's what made it unbearable. Friday evening, the night before the funeral, I called them again. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I wanted to give them one more chance to surprise me. Maybe I wanted to hear regret in their voices. Maybe I wanted to believe I was wrong. My mother answered. Her voice sounded distracted, music playing faintly in the background. "Hi, sweetheart." "Sweetheart." The words scraped against me. "Are you coming tomorrow?" I asked. There was no small talk, no soft lead-in. Just the question sitting between us like a knife. A long exhale. "Emily, we talked about this." No, we hadn't talked. They had explained. "I need you there," I said. My voice didn't crack. I was too empty for that. "He's your grandson." My father got on the phone. "We understand that, but we've already committed to Chloe's event. There are over 50 guests, vendors, deposits." Deposits. My son's coffin costs money too. "You can leave early," I said. "Come to the funeral, then go." "It's not that simple," my mother replied. "We're hosting. We can't just disappear." Disappear. The irony nearly made me laugh. "You disappeared his whole life," I said quietly. Silence. My father's voice hardened slightly. "That's not fair." Not fair. That phrase had followed me my entire childhood. When Chloe got something I didn't, I was told not to compare. When I felt overlooked, I was told not to be dramatic. Now, standing in my kitchen with my son's hospital bracelet still on the counter, I was being unfair. "Saturday morning," I repeated slowly. 10 a.m. My mother's voice dropped into something that sounded almost patient. "Emily, funerals are for the living. Matthew won't know whether we're there or not." I think something inside me cracked then. Not loudly, just cleanly. He was 8 months old, she continued. He didn't have relationships the way older children do. My hand began to shake. He had us, I whispered. He had you. We can remember him privately, my father added. We'll say a prayer. A prayer. While cutting cake, I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. Saturday morning arrived gray and still. The church was full. Ryan's parents were there before we were. His mother held my arm as we walked inside. His father carried the small framed photo of Matthew, the one where he was grinning with his 2 bottom teeth showing. Colleagues from my school filled rows quietly. Neighbors, friends, people who had known him for only 8 months but loved him fiercely. The empty pew behind us felt like a physical presence. Everyone noticed. No one asked at first. The service blurred. Scripture. Music. A eulogy Ryan somehow managed to deliver without collapsing. I stood beside him and spoke about Matthew's laugh, the way it bubbled out of him like he was surprised by joy. My voice sounded steady. I don't know how. When it was time to move to the cemetery, the sky had shifted from gray to a pale, washed-out blue. The air was cold. The coffin was impossibly small. As the pastor began the final prayer, my phone vibrated in my coat pocket. I ignored it. Then it vibrated again. And again. I don't know what made me look. Maybe it was muscle memory. Maybe part of me still hoped it was my mother saying they were on their way. I pulled it out. Instagram notification. Chloe's story. My thumb hovered, then tapped. There she was, standing under string lights inside a decorated venue. Gold balloons shaped like the number 30 behind her. Music playing. My mother adjusting a floral centerpiece. My father raising a champagne glass. Both smiling. The timestamp read 10:17 a.m. It was 10:19 a.m. We were lowering my son into the ground. My vision tunneled. The sound of dirt hitting wood felt louder than it should have. Ryan leaned toward me. M? I handed him the phone. He stared at it. His jaw tightened. He slipped the phone back into my coat pocket without a word. I didn't cry. I just felt something shift permanently. When the burial ended, people hugged us. Whispered condolences. Several asked gently where my parents were. Not feeling well, I lied automatically. The words tasted like metal. On the drive home, Ryan finally spoke. They posted during the service. I nodded. They knew exactly what they were doing. That was the moment the grief split in two. There was the grief for Matthew. And then there was the grief for the realization that my parents had never actually chosen me. Not once when it mattered most. And they weren't going to start now. That afternoon, while I sat in the nursery staring at the empty crib, my phone buzzed again. A text from my mother. Hope everything went smoothly today. We'll talk soon. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just logistics. And in that moment, I understood something with terrifying clarity. This wasn't a scheduling conflict. This was a choice. And they had made it. The house was too quiet after the funeral. Grief doesn't scream all the time. Sometimes it just hums in the walls. Ryan and I moved through the evening, like actors who had forgotten their lines. People had filled the house earlier. Casseroles, hugs, the soft rustle of sympathy. But by nightfall, it was just us again. And Matthew's empty crib. I stood in the nursery doorway for a long time. The mobile still turned gently from the draft of the hallway. Little felt clouds spinning over a mattress that would never hold him again. Ryan came up behind me. They didn't call, he said quietly. I nodded. They posted more photos, he added. I didn't ask to see them. I already knew. Sunday morning, my phone rang. My mother. I stared at it until it stopped. Then it rang again, and again. Finally, I answered. Hi, honey, she said brightly. Too brightly. How are you holding up? Holding up. Like I was furniture. How was the party? I asked. Silence. Then a small irritated sigh. Emily, is that really necessary? Yes, I said calmly. It is. It went well, she replied stiffly. Chloe was very happy. It was important to her. Important. My throat tightened, but my voice stayed level. And the funeral? We assumed it went as planned. Assumed. I pressed my palm against the kitchen counter to steady myself. You posted during the burial. We didn't think you'd be checking social media. That answer told me everything. Not we're sorry. Not we didn't realize. Just an admission that they knew it would look bad. My father's voice cut in from the background. Emily, we're not doing this. What's done is done. What's done is done. I thought of the tiny coffin, of the dirt hitting wood, of Ryan's hand shaking in mine. Yes, I said softly. It is. They began explaining again. Deposits, commitments, Chloe's feelings, guests traveling in from out of town. I let them talk. And something strange happened. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to defend myself. I wasn't arguing. I wasn't pleading. I was just listening and realizing they genuinely believed they had made a reasonable decision. My mother said something that landed like ice. Babies don't form the same bonds. He wouldn't have known whether we were there. I felt my jaw lock. He was my son, I replied. I knew. There was a pause. Then my father said, "We can't keep rehashing this. You're grieving. Emotions are high." There it was. The narrative shift. I wasn't hurt. I was emotional. I wasn't betrayed. I was overreacting. "I need some space," I said. My mother sounded offended. "So you're going to punish us?" Punish. As if distance was revenge instead of survival. "I'm not punishing you," I replied. "I'm protecting myself." I hung up. My hands trembled after. Not from anger, from clarity. Ryan found me sitting at the dining table, staring at nothing. What did they say? "They think we're overreacting." His eyes darkened. He knelt in front of me, hands on my knees. "You are not overreacting." I nodded, but a small, stubborn part of me whispered, "Maybe I am." Because when favoritism is your normal, injustice feels familiar. You start doubting your own pain. The following Friday, exactly 1 week after the funeral, my mother called again. This time she didn't mention Matthew at all. She invited us to Sunday dinner. "Chloe wants to show photos from the party," she said cheerfully. "It might be good for you to get out of the house." I stared at the wall. "Photos," I repeated. Yes, it was such a beautiful event. Beautiful. "Do you hear yourself?" I asked. "You can't hide from life forever, Emily. Life goes on." Life goes on. My sons did not. She then asked if we could bring dessert because I always bake something impressive. That was when something inside me snapped. Not loudly, but decisively. "You missed your grandson's funeral," I said slowly. "And you want cake." She sighed. "You're being dramatic." There it was again. Dramatic. Sensitive. Overreacting. I hung up. Ryan was standing in the doorway. He had heard enough. "We don't have to go," he said. I surprised both of us by saying, "We're going." He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Why?" "Because I need to see something clearly." I didn't know what that something was yet, but I knew I needed to face it. Not for them. For me. Sunday dinner smelled like rosemary chicken and fresh bread. The table was set with my mother's good china. There were flowers in the center, suspiciously similar to the ones from Chloe's party. Chloe was already there with her boyfriend. The photo album lay open on the coffee table like an exhibit. No one mentioned Matthew. Not once. They launched straight into party highlights. The DJ. The speeches. The cake reveal. My mother beamed while describing how emotional Chloe had been during the toast. I waited. I gave them an hour. An entire hour of listening to laughter about a night that happened while I buried my son. Finally, I spoke. "Did you enjoy yourselves?" The room went quiet. My father frowned. "Don't start." "Start what?" I asked calmly. "Reality?" Chloe rolled her eyes. "Can we not ruin another day?" "Another day." As if I'd ruined the funeral too. I leaned forward. "Did you tell your guests where you were supposed to be that morning?" My mother's lips pressed thin. "We told them your father wasn't feeling well." So they knew. They knew enough to lie. Ryan stood beside me, silent but solid. I felt something inside me settle into place. Not anger. Not grief. Recognition. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was who they were. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to twist myself into smaller shapes to accommodate it. "We're leaving," I said. My mother's voice sharpened. "You're being unreasonable." "No," I replied quietly. "I'm being done." We walked out. And for the first time since Matthew died, my grief felt clean. Because I wasn't swallowing betrayal on top of it anymore. That night, lying in bed, Ryan asked softly, "What happens now?" I stared at the ceiling. The same ceiling I had stared at during midnight feedings. The same ceiling that had watched me rock Matthew to sleep. "I don't know," I admitted. But for the first time, I knew what wasn't going to happen. I wasn't going to pretend this was normal. If the funeral was the fracture, the week after Sunday dinner was the collapse. I didn't call my parents. They didn't call me either. For 5 days there was silence. It was almost peaceful. Then the extended family found out the truth. And everything detonated. It started with my Aunt Patricia, my mother's older sister. She called on a Wednesday afternoon while I was sitting at the kitchen table sorting through Matthew's clothes for donation. Tiny socks, onesies with cartoon elephants, the sweater Ryan's mother had knitted. "Emily," Patricia said, her voice tight, "I just spoke to your mother." Something in her tone made me sit up straighter. "What did she tell you?" "She said the funeral had been postponed." My fingers went numb. "She what?" "She told me there were complications with the funeral home." I closed my eyes. There were no complications. Patricia went quiet. "Tell me what really happened." So I did. Every detail. The phone call, the party, the Instagram posts, the lie about my father being sick. When I finished, she didn't speak for several seconds. Then I heard her inhale sharply. "I need to make some calls," she said. Within 48 hours, the family narrative shattered. My Uncle James called my father and told him he was ashamed. My cousin Rebecca left a voicemail for my mother saying she wouldn't attend any more family gatherings until an apology was made. Even my grandmother, 89 years old and usually silent on everything, called my mother and told her she was disappointed. Disappointed. The word landed heavier than anger. For the first time in my life, my parents weren't insulated by polite silence, and they did not handle it well. 2 weeks after the funeral, my mother called me. She was crying. Not the quiet, controlled crying I'd seen maybe twice in my life. This was messy. The family is treating us like outcasts, she said. I don't understand why everyone is making such a big deal out of this. I sat very still. A big deal, I repeated. We tried to do right by Chloe, she insisted. She had been planning that party for months. And Matthew had been alive for 8, I replied softly. She ignored that. People are acting like we committed a crime. You lied, I said, multiple times. That was to avoid gossip. No, I said, it was to avoid consequences. Silence. Then the justification began again. Deposits, guests, commitments, focusing on joy instead of death. Then she said something that made my stomach turn. He was just a baby, Emily. He wouldn't have known. My hand tightened around the phone. But I knew, I said. Ryan, sitting across from me, closed his eyes. My mother continued. Babies don't have the same relationships as older children. It's not the same. That sentence was the moment I realized this wasn't about favoritism. It was about values. She genuinely believed the magnitude of an event was measured by social visibility, not emotional weight. A birthday party had guests. A funeral had grief. She chose the one with applause. 3 days later, Chloe called. She had never called me directly before. We were the kind of sisters who communicated through family group chats and occasional obligatory texts. Can we meet for coffee? She asked. Why? I said. To clear the air. The family drama is exhausting. Drama. I almost laughed. We met at a cafe halfway between our houses. She arrived in a fitted blazer, hair perfect, phone face down on the table. I understand you're grieving, she began carefully, but you're being unfair. Unfair, I repeated. Yes. Mom and Dad made a commitment to my party. You expected them to abandon it. Abandon, I echoed. She leaned forward. I invited over 50 people. Some traveled out of state. Do you know how humiliating it would have been to cancel? Humiliating. I stared at her. Matthew was in a coffin, I said. She flinched. Not from guilt. From discomfort. That's not a fair comparison. Why? They're different kinds of events. Different kinds. I felt something cold settle inside me. She truly believed this was a scheduling conflict. They could have come to both, she continued, but you demanded they choose. I asked them to attend their grandson's funeral. You're weaponizing grief, she snapped. Weaponizing. I looked at her for a long time. Would you have canceled your party? I asked quietly. She hesitated. Then, I've only turned 30 once. There it was. Honesty. Clear and unfiltered. And I only buried my son once, I said. She shifted in her seat. You can have other children. The cafe noise seemed to drop away. What did you just say? I mean, it's tragic. But babies die sometimes. It's not anyone's fault. Ryan had warned me that this conversation might break something permanently. He was right. I stood up. I don't want to hear from you again, I said. She rolled her eyes. You're overreacting. I left. And as I walked to my car, I realized something terrifying. Neither of them thought they had done anything morally wrong. They thought I was the problem. That night, Ryan sat on the edge of the bed beside me. They're not going to change, he said gently. I stared at the wall. I know. And if they're not going to change, what does that mean for us? It meant boundaries. It meant distance. It meant choosing our sanity over family harmony. But I wasn't ready to say it out loud yet, because cutting contact doesn't just end conversations. It ends identities. I had been the reasonable daughter my whole life, the one who didn't make waves, the one who understood. Now I was becoming something else. And that terrified me almost as much as losing Matthew. But the escalation wasn't finished. Because when people like my parents start losing social standing, they don't apologize. They retaliate. And I had no idea what they were about to do next. If grief was a storm, the retaliation was the flood that followed. I thought the worst of it had already happened. I was wrong. 2 weeks after the coffee meeting with Chloe, my principal called me into her office. I had just returned to work part-time, trying to anchor myself in routine. Equations were predictable. Teenagers were loud but honest. It was easier than sitting in a silent house. My principal, Mrs. Carter, closed the door gently. Emily, she said carefully, your mother called the school. My stomach dropped. She asked whether we believed you were mentally stable enough to return to teaching. The room felt smaller. What? She implied you were having a breakdown after a family tragedy and that she was concerned about your ability to function. My ears rang. She asked about your leave balance, Mrs. Carter continued, and whether we had provided mental health interventions. I stared at her. I know, she interrupted softly. I told her employee information is confidential and that any concerns should be discussed with you directly. Heat crawled up my neck. Not grief. Humiliation. They hadn't just missed the funeral. They were now rewriting the narrative. I wasn't hurt. I was unstable. When I got home, Ryan was pale. She called my lab too, he said. My hands went cold. She what? She told my supervisor she was worried we were making poor decisions while grieving. Poor decisions, meaning distancing ourselves, meaning holding them accountable, meaning not pretending everything was fine. I sat down on the edge of the couch. For the first time since Matthew died, I felt rage instead of sorrow. They were trying to discredit us. If they couldn't control the family narrative, they would undermine our credibility. I called my mother immediately. What were you thinking? I asked. I was worried, she replied calmly. You called my workplace. You weren't answering our calls. So you implied I was unstable? I never said unstable, I said emotional. Emotional. The same word they'd used my whole life whenever I reacted to being sidelined. You tried to sabotage my career, I said. That's dramatic. There it was again. Dramatic. I was concerned you might make permanent decisions you'd regret. Like cutting contact? Yes. She said it without hesitation. She genuinely believed she was intervening for my own good. I hung up. And for the first time in my life, I didn't cry afterward. I just felt empty. 2 days later, it got worse. Chloe showed up at our house uninvited. Ryan was at work. I was grading papers at the kitchen table when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, she walked past me without waiting for an invitation. She carried a gift bag. I thought you might want this, she said brightly. She pulled out party decorations. Gold napkins, a leftover slice of cake in plastic wrap, printed photos. Photos of my parents laughing, dancing, raising glasses. All this effort went into it, she said. I think if you actually see how beautiful it was, you'll understand why they couldn't cancel. I stared at her. You brought birthday decorations into my house, I said slowly, where my son's crib still smells like him. She frowned. You're being unfair. Unfair. The word felt like a curse. You're trying to help, she insisted. You're stuck in grief. You're letting it control you. She held up a photo of my parents giving a speech. Look how proud they were. I saw it then. Crystal clear. This wasn't about misunderstanding. This wasn't about conflict resolution. They believed joy was more valuable than grief. Visibility more important than presence. Reputation more important than loyalty. Leave, I said. I'm not finished. Leave. She sighed dramatically. You're destroying this family. No, I replied. I'm just refusing to pretend. She dropped the gift bag on the coffee table. Marcus barely lived, she said almost impatiently. I've been alive 30 years. Something inside me finally snapped, not loudly, but irreversibly. Get out, I said. This time my voice wasn't soft. She left. I picked up the gift bag and threw it straight into the trash without opening it further. Then I sat on the kitchen floor and finally let myself sob. Not just for Matthew, but for the realization that my parents and sister were fundamentally different from who I had believed they were. I had lost my son, and in the aftermath, I had lost the illusion of my family. That second loss cut almost as deep. That night, Ryan held me while I cried until my body shook. We can move, he whispered. Move? A fresh start. New city, new jobs, new space. I looked around our house, the nursery, the hallway where Matthew had learned to crawl. It felt impossible, but staying felt suffocating. I don't want to run, I said. You're not running, he replied. You're protecting us. Protecting. That word felt different from punishment, different from revenge. It felt steady. Still, the next few days were my lowest point. I lay awake at night replaying everything. Maybe I should forgive. Maybe I should compromise. Maybe I should try one more time. Maybe I was too harsh. Because that's what happens when you grow up in a family that minimizes you. You start minimizing yourself. I even found myself drafting a text message to my mother, deleting it, drafting again, deleting again, until Ryan gently took my phone and set it face down. You don't owe them your silence, he said, and you don't owe them reconciliation. For the first time since the funeral, I allowed myself to say the truth out loud. They would do it again. Ryan didn't hesitate. Yes, and that was the darkest realization of all. Not that they failed once, but that even after the fallout, after the family backlash, after the confrontation, they still couldn't say they would choose differently. That meant this wasn't an accident. It was character, and you can't grieve someone into becoming who they aren't. I had reached the bottom, not because I lost my son, but because I finally accepted I had lost the version of my parents I thought existed. And from that depth, there was only one direction left to go. Up. The turning point didn't come with shouting. It came with one question, and my father's answer. By the time my parents drove to our house unannounced for what would be their final attempt, Ryan and I had already started discussing moving. Boxes hadn't been packed yet, but mentally we were halfway gone. I saw their car in the driveway when I pulled up from work. For a split second, I considered driving past, just disappearing. But something in me, something steadier now, said, face it once, finish it properly. They were sitting in the car. My father stared straight ahead. My mother dabbed at her eyes. I stepped out and walked toward them. Ryan joined me, silent but close enough that our shoulders nearly touched. My father got out first. He looked older than I remembered. We need to talk, he said. I'm listening, I replied. We didn't invite them inside. We stood in the driveway, cold air between us. He spoke for almost 10 minutes. About family, about misunderstandings, about how the extended family backlash had been painful, about how they had been thinking a lot. Then he said it. We realize now that we made the wrong choice. The words hung in the air. For the first time since Matthew died, I heard something that sounded like accountability. But I didn't move. I didn't soften. I asked the only question that mattered. If you had to make that choice again, I said quietly, what would you do? He hesitated. That hesitation lasted maybe 3 seconds. But it felt like a lifetime. I would try to attend both, he said finally. Maybe leave the party early, or arrive at the funeral late. There it was. Not I would choose the funeral. Not I would choose my grandson. But compromise. Optimization. Damage control. Even after everything, the family fallout, the confrontation, the humiliation, he still couldn't say the words. He still couldn't fully choose us. That was the moment something inside me clicked into place. Crystal clear. This wasn't about a single event. It wasn't about the party. It wasn't even about favoritism. It was about values. My parents measured importance by visibility, social consequence, and convenience. I measured it by loyalty and presence. We were operating on entirely different systems, and no amount of pleading could align them. My mother finally spoke. We're apologizing, she said tearfully. What more do you want? I want to know that in the worst moment of my life, I replied, my voice steady, you would choose me without calculating the cost. Silence. My father looked at the ground. My mother looked confused. That's when I understood. They didn't even fully grasp the question. To them, every decision involved weighing variables. To me, some decisions were absolute. My son's funeral was absolute, and they had treated it like a calendar conflict. I can't build a relationship on that, I said. My mother's face crumpled. So you're cutting us off forever? Over one mistake? One mistake. The phrase echoed through every childhood memory, every dismissed milestone, every subtle preference for Chloe. It wasn't one mistake, I said gently. It was the final confirmation. Ryan's hand slid into mine. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was reacting. I felt like I was choosing. I'm not punishing you, I continued. I'm protecting my peace. My father straightened slightly. You'll regret this, he said. Maybe I would. But regret and self-respect sometimes share the same road. I can't undo what you did, I replied, but I can decide what I allow going forward. My mother started crying harder. You're breaking this family. No, I said quietly. I'm acknowledging what it is. They left after that. No yelling. No dramatic scene. Just a quiet ending. As their car pulled away, I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel triumph. I felt relief. Not because I had won something, but because I had stopped fighting reality. That night, Ryan and I sat on the kitchen floor with a notebook. We move, he said. Yes, I replied. 4 hours away. A new school district had a math opening. Ryan had already been offered a position at a larger dental lab in that city. We had hesitated before. Not anymore. It wasn't running. It was resetting. A week later, we signed a lease. Small backyard. Quiet neighborhood. No shared history. No string lights that would ever remind me of what they chose. As we packed the nursery, I paused. I touched the edge of the crib. This house held him, I whispered. Ryan wrapped his arms around me. And the next house will hold the memory, he said. The grief didn't vanish. It never would. But something had shifted. For the first time since Matthew died, I felt like I wasn't just surviving loss. I was building something beyond it, and that was the beginning of healing. We moved on a Tuesday. Not because Tuesday meant anything special, just because it was available. The moving truck pulled away from the only house Matthew had ever known, and I stood in the driveway longer than I expected. Ryan touched my shoulder. You ready? No, but yes. Because staying would have meant living inside a museum of what was lost. And I needed a future, not a shrine. The fallout didn't explode dramatically. It unfolded slowly, like a quiet unraveling. Within weeks of our move, the extended family divided themselves without us asking them to. My Aunt Patricia stopped attending gatherings if my parents were hosting. My cousin Rebecca publicly declined an invitation to Chloe's holiday dinner, writing in the group chat, I don't celebrate with people who skip funerals. No one responded to her message. But no one contradicted it either. My grandmother stopped answering my mother's calls entirely. For a woman who had survived wars and buried siblings, that silence carried weight. My parents didn't expect consequences to stick. They had spent decades being socially comfortable, well-liked, respected. Now invitations came less frequently. Phone calls were shorter. The subtle shift in social standing unsettled them more than our distance ever had. Chloe felt it too. She texted once, "You've ruined everything." I didn't respond, because I hadn't ruined anything. I had simply refused to lie. A month after we moved, my father emailed. Not emotional, not apologetic, strategic. He proposed structured reconciliation, family therapy, monthly dinners, gradual rebuilding. But even in that email, he framed the conflict as mutual misunderstanding. Not a moral breach, not a choice, just miscommunication. I read it twice, then deleted it. Because reconciliation without shared values is just proximity. And I no longer wanted proximity. Sure. Ryan's parents visited our new home first. They brought groceries without asking what we needed. They didn't comment on the nursery being smaller. They didn't avoid Matthew's name. They stood in the backyard with us while we planted a small tree in his memory. His mother pressed soil into place gently. "He was here," she said simply. No analysis, no justification, just presence. That contrast clarified everything. Family isn't proven during celebrations. It's proven during collapse. In the new city, something unexpected happened. I breathed. No surprise phone calls. No triangulation. No passive-aggressive comments about being dramatic. Just quiet. Ryan started his new job. I started at a school known for supporting teachers through hardship. No one there knew my history beyond what I chose to share. That anonymity felt like oxygen. We began volunteering at a local organization for parents who had lost infants. The first time I sat in that circle and said Matthew's name without explaining my family drama, I felt something loosen inside me. Grief shared without competition, without comparison, without minimization. 2 months later, I heard through Patricia that my parents were still defending their decision at gatherings. We tried to attend both. It wasn't that simple. They're being stubborn, another familiar word. But something inside me had changed. Their narrative no longer felt like a threat. It felt predictable, because here was the real fallout. They had to live with their choice. I didn't. They had to justify it repeatedly. I didn't. They had to defend it socially. I didn't. All I had to do was live consistently with my values. And consistency is quieter than drama, but far more powerful. Damn. One evening, Ryan and I sat on the back steps watching the sunset over our small yard. "Do you ever feel guilty?" he asked softly. I considered it. "Yes," I admitted, "sometimes." "For what?" "For choosing distance." He nodded. "Do you feel wrong?" I thought about my father's hesitation, my mother's calculations, Chloe's cake in my living room. "No," I said finally. Guilt and wrongness are not the same. Guilt can come from breaking old patterns. Wrongness comes from breaking your integrity. I hadn't broken mine. The extended family eventually stopped asking whether we would reconcile. They saw the line. They understood it wasn't temporary. My parents stopped calling. Not because they accepted it, but because they realized pressure no longer worked. And in that quiet space, something steady grew inside me. Not anger, not triumph, just peace. People sometimes think fallout looks like revenge, like dramatic consequences, like public humiliation. But real fallout is subtler. It's the slow erosion of trust. It's the permanent awareness of what someone is capable of choosing. It's the absence of closeness that once existed. My parents lost access to our daily lives. They don't know what my kitchen looks like now. They don't know which street our house is on. They don't know how Ryan laughs when he's finally relaxed again. They don't know the way I sit in the backyard sometimes and talk to Matthew out loud. That is the cost. And they chose it. One night, as I closed the door to our new home, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't carrying anger anymore. I was carrying clarity. And clarity is heavier at first, but lighter in the long run. It's strange how time works. Some days feel like a blur of logistics. Job changes, apartment tours, grocery shopping, laundry. But other days I can still feel the weight of the past. The days when I lived in a house filled with contradictions. The house where I believed that love and loyalty could always be counted on. It wasn't that simple, was it? I don't think I'll ever forget the day Matthew passed. The way the world seemed to hold its breath with me, then exhaled when it was over. The days in the hospital, when I couldn't even remember what time it was because nothing had a clock anymore. But I also won't forget the moment that changed everything. The moment when my parents made their choice and I finally understood it. I had spent my life trying to make their love fit into a box of expectations. I thought if I tried harder, made fewer waves, they would change. They would see me. But the truth is, they never had to. They never had to choose me because they didn't see me as needing to be chosen. And the moment I realized, that was the moment I realized I had been the one giving too much weight to what didn't matter. Their actions didn't break me, they freed me. I had spent too long trying to align myself with their version of love and family. I had accepted that if I gave in just enough, I could avoid the hurt. That if I bent to their expectations, I could hold on to the illusion of harmony. But true harmony, true peace, didn't come from appeasing them. It came from deciding I no longer needed to prove myself to them. It came from making the hardest decision of all, letting go of the idea that family is always blood, and sometimes it's simply those who show up for you when it counts. Ryan and I started fresh in the way that mattered. We began to rebuild what had always been there: trust, compassion, a steady partnership. And our lives began to shift, slowly at first, but with momentum. We found joy in small things again, in the quiet comfort of our new neighborhood, in the certainty that no one's expectations would weigh us down anymore. We found peace in knowing we had made the right choice, not just for ourselves, but for Matthew too. I no longer measured my family by what I had hoped they would give me. I measured it by what I chose to build for myself. It's been a year since we moved. Ryan and I have found a rhythm, a new beginning. The house feels like ours now. The garden is growing. The tree we planted for Matthew has taken root, its branches stretching toward the sky. I still think about him every day, but I no longer feel that grief is a weight I have to carry alone. I have learned to live with the absence without letting it define every part of me. I've learned that healing isn't linear, it's a choice, every day. And I've learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do for yourself is stop fighting for a place at a table that wasn't built for you in the first place. Love. We've talked about adopting, giving love. We've talked about adopting, giving a home to someone who needs it, but doing it when we're both ready to be fully present. For now, I'm still finding pieces of myself that I had to hide for too long. I'm still learning to let go of old stories, to write new ones. And as for my parents, well, I've stopped looking for them at all. They have their own story to tell, but it's no longer mine. I choose peace, and that, above everything else, is enough.